I'm Evelyn Carter, and last January the Pacific tried to erase me. By dawn, half my Oregon cottage hung in the air like a held breath. Then the bluff let go. They called it king tides, atmospheric rivers, and an act of God. But as my books bobbed out to sea, I heard something truer. The storm was just the alibi. I climbed into a neighbor's SUV with a fireproof pouch and one thought I hadn't said in decades, Finn. Seattle smelled like new money and eucalyptus. My son's fiancé had boundaries and a spreadsheet. Insurance showed up with a body cam and a word that closes cases, unprecedented. Then a roofer with a mermaid tattoo said the quiet part out loud. Somebody up coast cut a road and told the water to move. That's when I stopped being a victim and started being a librarian with questions. I followed culverts and paper trails north to a sanctuary run by the boy I once loved, now a man with sea glass eyes and a kettle that always boiled on time. Together we walked shorelines like detectives, found a name that kept repeating, and asked a room full of officials the only question that matters. What's the distance between profit and home? Before this ends, a whistleblower will speak, a company will flinch, a settlement will do more than replace wood and nails, and I'll learn that second chances don't come with violins. They come with thermoses, tide charts, and a hand that doesn't let go when the wind rises. Stay. Because this isn't a storm story, it's a story about what moved the storm. The storm began as a rumor in the town's diner. Fishermen with hands cut by rope and salt said the pressure was dropping fast, the kind of drop that makes a person's bones ache. I walked home under a low iron sky, pulling my scarf tighter, and told myself I had candles, a crank radio, and enough soup to feed a marching band. My cottage had belonged to my grandmother before me, and she had always said, "A house with stories can handle a little wind." She was wrong, or maybe the wind had learned new tricks. By midnight, the ocean sounded like a freight train. The power wheezed and died. Cold moved in with a quiet confidence, touching everything. At 2 a.m, I heard a thump in the crawl space, then a groan in the joists. At 3:15, the back deck was an idea, not a structure. I told myself it was the surge, the high tide, the mouth of the creek chewing away the bluff with a hunger older than the lighthouse down the bend. I kept saying it was the ocean, because that is easier than saying it was people. The first crack in my understanding arrived as a sound, a long, low failure of wood under load, followed by a tilt in the floor that made the teacups chatter in their cabinet. I hauled on my boots with one hand and took the little fireproof pouch with the other, the one with our mortgage papers, Daniel's flag card, and the bronze lighthouse key fob Finn gave me the summer we were 19. I opened the front door to a horizontal wall of rain. The wind took my breath. Somewhere in it, a car horn bleated like a panic that could not remember its name. A neighbor's SUV idled with headlights slicing the storm. "Evelyn?" It was Ruthie from 2 doors down, her hair tucked inside a plastic shower cap under a hood. "You've got to go." "I can't leave." Another shudder ran through the cottage, and the living room slid slightly left. The books on my shelves sighed and leaned. All at once, I was a woman who understood that a house is wood and nails, not a promise. I stepped into the rain with the pouch inside my coat and climbed into Ruthie's car, boots muddy, breath short, heart saying a word I had not said aloud in decades. Finn. By morning, my cottage was half a cottage. The bluff had eaten the rest. People said landslide, king tide, atmospheric river, words that taste like science and distance. I tasted loss. I stood behind yellow tape with my neighbors and watched the Pacific swat the pieces of my life and carry them toward Japan. A policeman with kind eyes asked if I had family. I said yes. That was the first lie. I have a son named Mark. He lives near Seattle, in a neighborhood with 2 kinds of maples and 1 acceptable shade of taupe. He works in project finance for a development company that builds places that talk about live work while they erase the kind of grocery you walk to in the rain. He is a good man in ways that people can measure, on time with taxes, kind to dogs, generous to partner charities. But goodness gets complicated when money hums nearby. His fiancée, Lila, is very beautiful in the way of people who know what they want and are never sorry about it. There is nothing wrong with knowing what you want. The trouble starts with what you are willing to do to get it. I slept on Ruthie's couch that night. I slept badly. with the ocean in my ears and Daniel's palm on my shoulder in a memory I could not bear to wake up from. In the morning, I dialed Mark with the awkward thumbs of a mother who never stopped believing her son would arrive when she needed him most. He answered on the third ring, polite warmth in his voice. "Hey, Mom, you okay? I saw the news. That looked rough down there." "It was more than rough," I said, and the paper towel in my hand developed a damp crescent I did not remember crying into. "The house isn't safe. Half of it is gone." He was silent for a beat, maybe two. Office noise threaded the background like a politely caged animal. "Did you call your insurance?" "Yes, they'll send a person. I can't stay in Ruthie's more than a night or two. I was thinking, could I come up for a bit, just until I figure out where to land?" Another beat. "Of course," he said. "We'll talk to Lila. Maybe the guest room?" I pretended not to hear the maybe. I arrived with a duffel bag that looked like it belonged to someone smaller than me. The entry smelled like eucalyptus and wealth. Lila opened the door with a smile that framed her teeth like product in a clean glass case. "Evelyn," she said as if we were meeting at a gala, "I'm so sorry about your house. Those storms are just awful." "Thank you," I said, stepping onto a rug that probably cost more than all the books I bought in a decade. "It'll be okay. I just need a bit of time." She tilted her head in a way that might have been compassion. "Time is tricky for us right now. Mark's Q1 is intense, and I'm interviewing for a new role. We've been trying to keep boundaries." There it was, the modern word that does the ancient work of a locked door. Mark appeared, tie loosened, eyes sincere. He kissed my cheek with love that did not yet know where to sit in a room like this. "We can do a few days," Lila said brightly before he could speak. "Just while you get your insurance sorted and a longer-term plan. There's also a really nice extended stay near the lake with kitchenettes." "Lila," Mark said softly. "What?" she said, the smile never falling. "I'm helping." I set my bag on the bench, palms flat, steadying the tremble that wanted to start. "A few days will be fine," I said. "I won't be in the way." I made soup that night because kitchens feel less like museums if something bubbles. Lila said she didn't do carbs after 6. Mark had 2 bowls and told me about a wetlands mitigation deck as if the words did not bump the memory of the creek behind my house. The next morning, a spreadsheet sat on the counter like a suggestion already decided. "We just mapped out a few options," Lila said, tapping cells that glowed with formulas, extended stay costs, ride shares, insurance estimates. "We can spot you a week, maybe 2. It just keeps everything clean." "Clean," I repeated, as if English had borrowed the word and forgotten to tell me what it meant. The insurance adjuster arrived at my half house with a body camera blinking red like an impatient heart. He said all the right things with a face that looked like a man who had learned how to let sympathy visit without staying. "Act of God," he said. "Practical words if you do not believe people build retaining walls that fail and cut down trees that hold soil." He took photos of the bluff and shook his head like a metronome set to sorrow. "Anything unusual?" I asked, and he paused long enough to notice. "There was grading up coast," he said. "A contractor widened a trail last fall. Sometimes that changes water paths, but the storm was the story here." Sometimes the storm is the alibi. On the 3rd day at Mark's, I found my teacup in a cabinet labeled Ceramics Seasonal and realized I was a guest in a museum curated by anxiety. Lila said the quiet parts gently. "Do you think you'll have a plan by Monday? I have a leadership off-site, and it would help me focus." "Monday," I said, and went to the guest room and shut the door without crying. I took the fireproof pouch out of my bag and held the bronze lighthouse token until it warmed. It is not a key, it is a token. 19-year-old Finn pressed it into my palm the summer we believed that summer is a place, not a season. "When you have no horizon," he said, "look for a light." Finn Merrick did not marry me. He married the ocean with a research grant and moved north to the Olympic Peninsula, chasing currents and birds with the patience that makes professors lean back and stop talking. We wrote letters for a year, then postcards for another, then silence did what it always does. It built a room and moved in. I typed Merrick into a search bar, expecting a law firm or a deli. Instead, I found a small, clean site with photos of a wildlife sanctuary near Port Townsend, wooden blinds in soft light, a sign that said Merrick Wharf, and a smiling man in his 60s with sun on his cheekbones. There are moments when your thumb hovers over a number and you hear a door creak open inside the tired house of your heart. He answered on the first ring. Merrick Sanctuary. It's Evelyn, I said, and sat because my knees approved. Evelyn Carter. Silence. Then the sound a person makes when life keeps a promise. Evie. No one calls me that. No one's allowed. I lost the house, I said. Half of it, maybe more. Where are you? He asked. Not how are you. The difference matters. Near Seattle. Marks. How long can you stay there? A few days, maybe a week. Come here, he said, and I heard gulls cut the air around his words. Come today. I'll meet your ferry. I'll put a kettle on. I don't want to be a burden. You were never a burden, he said. You were a compass. I bought a ticket and packed the pouch and slipped out of Mark's house while Lila was on a call about metrics. I left a note. I'm safe. I need to breathe. I'll call. On the ferry, I stood at the rail and let the cold do a kind thing to my face. A boy threw a chip to a gull and laughed when the bird caught it with a precision that felt like a brag. A couple in matching beanies argued softly about whether to buy a yurt. I touched the bronze token until my palm remembered. He waited at the terminal in a wool coat that had seen a decade of winters and 100 mornings that began with coffee and a list. His hair had surrendered to gray in the generous way some men's hair do. Full, honest. His eyes were the same, sea glass green that only shows when the light leans in. Evie, he said, as if the ferry had delivered a person from a year, not a boat from a dock. Finn, I said, and then we were the age we are now and the age we used to be. I was surprised both fit in one hug without breaking. He did not say, I'm sorry, like a formality that leaves before dessert. He said, I'm here, which is the only apology that matters. He lived in a cedar house that kept yesterday's bread as a promise. The sanctuary used to be a cannery. Now it held kayaks and maps and a bell that rang when a puffin did something joyful. Over tea, I told him about the cottage and the bluff and the woman who labeled her cabinets. He told me about a harbor seal rescued last spring and the way it blinked at a volunteer as if gratitude could form a sentence. You'll stay, he said, as if stay wasn't a word that should be careful. As long as you need. There's a room over the boathouse that catches morning light. I don't have rent, I said, because pride is a habit that wears poverty like a disguise. You'll help with the birds, he said. You always liked creatures that don't explain themselves. A week became 2, then a month, soft as tides. I made stew on nights cold enough to make the moon look brittle. He walked me around the sanctuary with the patient joy of a man who has never recovered from his first field guide. His friends became mine at a pace that didn't ask me to pretend I wasn't new. He had a partner once, long ago, kind, smart, the kind of woman who folded maps along the lines. She died 6 winters back after an illness that taught him how to sit quietly without planning his next sentence. Grief recognizes itself. He learned I hum when I am almost happy and go silent when I am very close. I learned he reads weather with his wrists and forgives people faster than he should. Neither of us mentioned the lighthouse token until the night I melted sugar for a tart, and he set a small dented tin on the counter like a confession. Inside lay a compass with a scratched face and a letter I wrote the year we stopped writing. I kept the awful ones too, he said, smiling at a corner like you do when you tell on yourself. You never married, I said. I tried, he said. I kept listening for a laugh that knew me. And? You write me now, he said, with your feet. The sanctuary needed a new roof on the kayak shed. A volunteer named Gabe said a crew from a local contractor could help if we didn't mind crude jokes and a radio that preferred classic rock. They came on a Wednesday with nail guns and 2 coolers. One of them, a man with a mermaid tattoo whose face looked like a tax problem, asked where I was from. When I said down coast near Brookings, he nodded like a man who had tried to park heavy machinery on mud. Winter ate a few places down there, he said. Somebody screwed the watershed with a stupid trail job. Everybody says storm, but it's always some guy with a permit he shouldn't have. Who? I asked, as if a name could put my house back together. Outfit out of Seattle, he said. Front for a bigger fish, snuck in after Labor Day, graded a maintenance road like they were paving a runway. County slapped a fine the size of a sandwich. The ocean took my house. Men carried it to the cliff. I told Finn everything, each word like a nail tapped into a truth that did not want to hang anywhere. He listened, then brought out a binder so fat it had eaten a slimmer binder, shoreline projects up and down the coast, public meeting notes, impact statements that read like bedtime stories for wolves. Your bluff isn't an accident, he said, tapping a map with lines that quarreled. Water found a new path because someone told it could. You could fight. It will take a year, maybe more. It will break your heart twice and fix it once. I'm tired, I said, too old to learn the shape of courtrooms. Then we'll make it a story, he said. Stories move things statutes can't if you tell them right. He taught me to walk a shoreline like a detective. We photographed culverts bullied into place. We measured sediment like bakers who care if the cake rises. In a diner with a waitress whose eyeliner was precise as mercy, we asked names and wrote down the names those names gave us. Across 3 counties, the same initials kept showing up on work orders like a rumor that lost its disguise, Northland Vale. I did not tell Mark at first. I did not want to force his life into my old living room. But secrets do not sleep when the floor tilts. He called while I was cutting lemons into moons. Where are you? He asked, absent worry in his voice. By the water, I said. With who? A sanctuary, I said, and an old friend. I heard from your adjuster, he said, which told me Lila was CC'd and spreadsheets were waking up. They're classifying it as an act of God. The payout won't replace the house. It wasn't God, I said softly. It was a crew with a grader. Your competitor. Silence found us quickly and sat between us. What's the name? His voice was careful. Northland Vale, I said. You know them? Yes, he said, breath dragging something through it. We bid against them last summer. Lila consulted on a PR piece for their coastal foundation 2 years ago. He paused. She didn't know about... She knew enough to love their logo, I said gently. It's not her fault, Mark, but someone cut a path that told a creek to find my bedroom. Mom, he said, and I braced for the apology that would arrive late and underdressed. Come home. We'll make this right. Home is a word that does not like being used metaphorically. The ocean is my home, I said. And this house where the kettle knows my name. I'm okay. I'm better than okay. Who is he asked, as if nouns could save a woman from verbs. A friend, I said, from when I was older than you are now. I didn't know about him, he said. Kids don't, I said, hoping he heard the mercy in it. Northland Vale's permit trail led to a county meeting 2 towns north of my half-house. Finn and I sat in a room that smelled like floor polish and civic faith and listened to a man in a jacket with elbow patches say mitigation and unprecedented weather events with a face like a clock. When the meeting opened for public comment, a woman with a baby on her hip stepped to the microphone and said, "My well is brown now," and the room nodded in a way that makes men sweat. I walked to the microphone when I should have stayed seated. My knees offered an opinion. So did my heart. I said my name and the color of the rug in the room that is now a conversation between the ocean and the sky. I held up a photograph of a maintenance road cut with lazy arrogance. I asked a question instead of making an accusation, because questions make liars do the work. What is the distance, I said, between profit and home? The Northland rep smiled professionally, a man who had chewed softer women than me. Ma'am, we're all doing our best in unprecedented times. I was a librarian for 32 years, I said. Unprecedented is a word old newspapers use to dress up disasters. The creek didn't do this alone. A reporter with a lanyard the color of patience asked for my number. He called 2 days later to say his editor liked the human angle, which is what editors call a heartbeat when they need headlines to breathe. The story ran small, then tall. A TV van came. Ruthie texted to say if I didn't like the way the camera adds 10 pounds, we could petition to remove the camera. I stood with my hands folded and said they would find a way to call it weather. The reporter nodded like a man who only believes what fits in a lowercase box. Northland Vale called me misinformed in a letter that used my first name as if they bought it at a store. Lila forwarded a link to their stewardship video with a note that said, "This is interesting. I did not answer. Finn printed their letter and wrote, "Frame this," in the margin. 3 weeks later, a state inspector named Yolanda knocked on the sanctuary door with boots that used to belong to someone who worked even harder. She shook my hand like we were about to move a couch together. "You made a mess," she said, smiling like a woman who enjoys messes that flush things out. "They asked me to close the file. I said I'd prefer to see the creek." We drove down coast in a truck that smelled like old rain. She asked exactly the right questions, then stopped asking and walked a slope with an inclinometer like she loved gravity and wanted to catch it cheating. She found a silt fence installed like a suggestion. She found straw blankets that let go of the hillside because no one bothered to pin them before a storm with a name. She took photos and said, "People like to marry weather when they're trying to divorce responsibility." Back at the sanctuary, she wrote for an hour, then looked up as if the page had confessed. "It's not enough to prove causation for your half-house, but it's enough to make their letters nervous." I slept hard and dreamed of Daniel at the kitchen table counting screws. He looked up and said, "I told you the short ones never hold." A month into the fight that wasn't a fight, Mark asked if he could visit. He arrived alone, shoulders tight in a coat that wanted to be a different coat. "This is where you live now," he said, regarding the cedars like they might pencil in an appointment. "I live here now," I said. "I don't know how long now is." He put his hands in his pockets the way men do when they are young and trying not to break something their mothers love. "I'm sorry we didn't make it easy," he said. "You made a spreadsheet," I said. "Sometimes that is love that forgot its face." He nodded and looked at the water where a cormorant held its wings like a benediction. "I was scared," he said. "Scared of being asked to do more than I could and failing you." "You can fail me," I said. "You can do it honestly." When a son cries at 40, he looks like a boy and a tired man together. He apologized for words he didn't say, and for ones Lila said brightly that cut anyway. He asked about Finn with curiosity that bounced once and didn't fall. "He calls you Evie," he said. "He earned it," I said. Northland Vale did what companies do when press gets inconvenient. They offered a settlement that looked like a holiday bonus. Yolanda told me privately that if I took it, I should make it noisy and kind. Sometimes it teaches lessons that balance sheets can't ignore. Finn said nothing until I asked. "I will not like you less if you take it," he said. "I will like you exactly the same if you don't. I will like you while you decide." I said no on a Friday afternoon because Friday afternoons are when people do brave math. I asked them to fund a community erosion study and rebuild public stairs that had been temporarily closed for 3 years. I wanted my half-house to be worth more than its square footage. They sent a second letter without my first name in it. Spring arrived like an apology. The sanctuary's trail smelled like cedar tea. Tourists came in jackets they couldn't decide to zip. Finn and I ate strawberries that tasted like something remembered how to be sweet. He touched my wrist when he passed behind me at the sink, and I didn't flinch. He didn't say, "I love you." He said, "I'll be back before the kettle boils," which is exactly the same when you are 64 and tired of speeches. We married in June in long light that refuses to let evening decide. We told few people because telling many is a young person's sport. Mark came and hugged Finn like a man who recognizes in another man the difference between performance and promise. Lila sent a text with confetti and then a screenshot of a nonprofit announcement. Northland Vale would fund the erosion study in collaboration with community stakeholders, which is what it sounds like when money blushes in public. "I didn't do that," I said on the porch with cake on my plate. "You did half," Finn said. "Yolanda did a quarter. A woman with a baby did the rest." In August, a reporter called to say a whistleblower had provided emails between a county contractor and a Northland Vale sub, sentences you only write when you assume the storm will swallow your tracks. The story did not say arson, lawyers dislike drama, but it said negligence with the confidence of a word that slept well. The settlement they offered in September would have bought 2 cottages and a decade of soup. I said yes this time. Not for a bigger rug, but for a roof on the kayak shed and a scholarship fund for kids who count birds like a prayer. We signed in an office with glass so clean it forgot it was there. Their attorney shook my hand as if the gesture came with continuing education credits. I stood at the bluff in October, where my cottage used to keep the wind company, and scattered Daniel's ashes on the anniversary we called our first morning. I said thank you to a house that did its best. I let the bronze lighthouse token go too and watched it fall, thinking for one frightened second about going after it. Finn held my hand like a lifeline and said, "Let the light learn the ocean." Not all love stories want violins and vows. Some want boiled potatoes and 2 mugs that know which side of the sink they live on. I wake in a room that used to be a boathouse and open a window that smells like today. Finn spoils the coffee and I fix it, and he calls that collaboration. The bell rings when a puffin makes a choice that embarrasses the word elegant, and we laugh in a way that tells the birds we are not judging. Mark calls on Tuesdays now, a habit he built and kept. He married Lila in a ceremony that looked like a brochure for a tasteful future. She cried at his speech about learning the difference between safety and shelter. They brought me a plant with glossy leaves that keeps forgiving me when I water it twice. When they visit, Lila stands at the dock's edge and pretends not to look for seals. She has become softer around the words she chooses. Softness is a miracle people don't brag about. One rainy Saturday, we drive to a community hall where the erosion study unveils charts and a slideshow with polite fonts. The lead scientist clears his throat and speaks gently but firmly. He shows maps, seasonal flows, culverts, and the contrail of a maintenance road poorly sited. He stops one slide on a line that bites the hillside and says, "The system followed the path of least resistance. The path was recently made. The room does not clap. It sighs, a sound that says we already knew. We were waiting for permission to know it out loud." A county commissioner asks for public comment. I do not walk to the microphone. A teenager with a skateboard under his arm does. He says, "I used to jump the stairs at Grindle Bluff. Then they closed them. People kept saying they'd fix it. Can we just fix it?" The room laughs, the kind of laugh that could also be a cry. The commissioner nods and writes something that looks like yes. Weeks later, the stairs reopen. They smell like fresh lumber and hope. Finn and I walk them slowly, counting steps as if counting could guarantee anything. At the bottom, the beach greets us with the same old shrug. The ocean does not apologize. The ocean does not confess. It simply keeps speaking its one exact language and asks us to learn it better. One morning in late winter, a small storm sneaks in and pulls a skiff loose from the far mooring. Finn sees it first and whistles in that low way he has. We jog along the dock, breath white in the air, and I hop down to grab the skiff's painter while he leans out with a boat hook. My knees argue. My back offers a footnote. I ignore them affectionately. When we pull the skiff in, wet and laughing, a seal surfaces a few yards out and blinks at us like we have interrupted its entertainment. "Show off," I tell it. "That's you," Finn says. I swat his shoulder with the back of my hand and he pretends it hurts. We are, for a moment, idiotic with happiness. I volunteer at the sanctuary's small desk on Thursdays now. I hand out maps and explain how to keep distance from nesting birds without becoming a story on the evening news. Children return with drawings of puffins that look like planets with beaks. Retired men tell me facts I already know, as if telling them is the point. A woman with a gray braid buys a membership and says, "My sister's house slid. Thank you for not letting them call it weather." I take her hand across the counter and say nothing, the one right thing to say. At night, Finn reads aloud from field notes written by people who paid attention before us. He mispronounces a Latin name and glares at me as if I invented Latin. I drift in and out of sleep to syllables that have no interest in me and love me anyway, because loving a person sometimes means loving what their mouth loves to say. There is a photograph on the boathouse wall now. It shows my cottage the summer before it learned to let go. The porch is small, the paint is tired, the hollyhocks are arrogant in trout pink. In the window, the suggestion of a woman's face appears if the light hits right. The volunteers ask if it is a trick. I say yes. The trick is how memory writes its name on glass. Daniel visits in dreams less often. When he does, we are always mid-task. We are sorting screws or untangling holiday lights. He says things like, "Let it be," and I say, "I'm trying." When I wake, I am not sad. I am busy. Grief, when it has finished flailing, becomes a list you do not mind doing. In late spring, Mark and Lila arrive with news that hits the dock before their boat does. She is pregnant, nervous, fiercely calm. Mark cannot stop touching her elbow like he is protecting the idea of her. He asks if I will come up for a few weeks when the baby arrives. I say yes. I say it so fast the word trips. Lila pretends not to notice and thanks me with a voice that carries the weight of a person learning to move a little weight that isn't hers alone. When their daughter is born, I hold her in a room where machines blink very gently, as if warning the walls not to be loud. She has Mark's mouth when he is concentrating and Lila's eyes when she is not defending a meeting. She closes her fingers around mine and squeezes with brand new ferocity. I cry because new humans make old women honest. On the drive back to the coast 2 weeks later, the radio says Northland Vale has rebranded. New name, new logo, a promise to learn. The DJ jokes that companies change names the way teenagers change majors. I turn it off and listen to the tires instead. Names are costumes. Behavior is biography. The Sanctuary Scholarship Fund sends 3 kids to a week-long coastal field program that summer. One of them, quiet, sharp, watchful, writes an essay about rivers being sentences and culverts being punctuation. I read the first paragraph and put the paper down and tell the room I need to sit with this. Finn kisses the top of my head as he passes, pretending not to notice I am crying over grammar. When hurricane remnants creep north in September, we prepare in the practical ways you do if you plan to keep living. We stow kayaks, we tie what will wander, we make a pot of soup the size of a baby bath. At 3 a.m, a gust slaps the house and the kettle on the stove hops like it wants to dance. I get up and pad barefoot to quiet the kitchen, and in the window over the sink, the lighthouse across the bay blinks in its old patient rhythm. I blink back. It keeps doing its one true job. I learn mine again. On our first anniversary, we walk the reopened stairs and stand where waves lip rocks with the diligence of a person you can count on. Finn takes a small box from his pocket, the kind that remembers velvet. Inside, there is no jewelry. There is a key to a small cabin farther up coast, a place we can disappear to when the world is loud. It needs work, he says. A roof that respects rain. Windows that know what glass is supposed to do. It's not your cottage. It will never be. It is something honest we can make together. I put the key in my palm and feel it warm, then say yes like my mouth is a bell and someone has finally struck it. We make lists immediately. We argue warmly about the order of priorities. He says, door frames. I say, mice. He laughs and concedes on mice. Marriage is a conversation that never gets bored with itself. A year later, the county honors Yolanda with a plaque and a cake baked by a person who takes pride in corners. She makes a small speech and says, "Thank you to the people who meant it when they said home." She gestures at me without making me stand. I mouth the words thank you and mean them with surprising strength. On Tuesdays, I still talk to Mark. On Saturdays, they send a picture of their daughter in shoes that make her taller than she is. She is holding a plastic gull above her head like a victory. She calls me Nana C and tells me she is learning the difference between seals and sea lions. I tell her sea lions bark and seals clap silently. I clap silently, and she barks on the phone, and we both declare ourselves scientists. Every so often, someone asks for the story. They do it shyly, curious but careful, as if my house were a wound that hasn't decided if it is a scar yet. I tell it simply. I say the storm took what it could. Some men helped it along. Other people helped me stand up. I say I called an old friend and he answered on the first ring. I say the lighthouse didn't come closer. It stayed where it belonged and blinked exactly on time. I say when you have no horizon, look for a light, but also look for a person who puts the kettle on anyway. If you are listening now, tell me where your tide begins. Tell me the name of your storm and the name of the person who met your ferry. If you can, help the sanctuary roof keep the kayaks dry. If you cannot, throw a chip to a gull and call that hope. And if you ever come north, bring a jacket. The light is long here. It shows you what you have.